Hi, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jameeleh Shelo, and I am author of Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine. Before I get started, I want to say a special thank you to Moraine Valley for inviting me to be a part of Arab Heritage Month, and a special thanks to Suzanne Nasser for putting this all together. I'm really honored, and thank you for highlighting my work. So yeah, let's get started. Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine was inspired by my son. His name is Laith, and when he was 4 months old, he never slept. He literally never slept. Like, the kid never wanted to take a nap. He never wanted to sleep at night. He would just stay up around the clock, and he was very colicky, so he was always crying. And for those of you who are parents, you know that this is extraordinarily stressful. Like, it is probably the worst thing in the world. And for some reason, whenever I'd read him stories, he would calm down. So we'd read stories about like little blue trucks and cats and hats and red balls and blue balls and dinosaurs and, what he's going to be when he grows up. And I started looking for books about Palestine because I think it's important to highlight our culture. And what I discovered is there were very few books about Palestine, and the few books that were written weren't really of quality, and there were some that were written and they weren't written by Palestinians. And so my husband looks at me and he goes, "I think you could write a better book." And I said, "Challenge accepted." And so I did. I wrote Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine because I kind of wanted him to see Palestine in a positive light. It was important to me that he saw himself, that there was a form of media that represented him before other forms of media took over, right? Because, as we're seeing in the world today and as we're seeing in our media, when you're Middle Eastern, unfortunately, you get represented very negatively. And for me, it was really important that I created this positive image of Palestine and positive image of who he is and the culture that he comes from in a very simple way, in a way that a small child could understand. So he would always sort of have that love of who he was, so that when other negative images came through, there was already the seeds planted for self-love and positivity. The way I guess it got started is really simple. I just started putting pen to paper. I, by trade, am a television producer, and I've been really lucky in my work. I've done a ton of theater, and I've gotten to kind of travel the world, and I am arrogant enough to believe that I can do anything. And so I decided, hey, writing a book can't be harder than making a TV show. And while I don't think it is harder, I definitely think it has its own challenges. And those are things that I just sort of learned along the way, which was pretty exciting. There's a couple things for me that are really important about this book. I think one of them is that the main character is a lion, but my Palestinian characters are never represented as animals. So while Laith is a lion and his mom is a giraffe, I'm the giraffe. His dad is a hawk, and his grandma is a panda. His cousin's a tiger. All those good things. When he goes to Palestine, what he sees are actual human beings. He meets other kids. He sees a teta sitting under an olive tree doing tetriz, and she's a human being. And it's an image that he can see, and he can see some like a beauty in the Palestinian people. I also like the idea that he travels over there, but his friends that he meets can't come back with him. And I think for me, for people that understand the situation of Palestine and how it's currently an occupied territory, and people in the West Bank are essentially trapped, and people particularly in Gaza are basically in an open-air prison, the fact that these people can't see their loved ones whenever they want to, they can't travel freely, they don't have freedom of movement, but to do it in a way that a child can understand, right? Like, I'm not trying to tell this story, like, I'm not trying to beat him over the head with a sad reality. What I'm trying to do is just create a reality that exists in a way that a child can understand, but still cultivate that love for their culture, right? We're not defined by the fact that we don't have freedom of movement. We are a people who have our own art, our own culture, our own food, all these beautiful things that happen at this point in time to not have freedom of movement. And it's a really important distinction. And I don't want to go too crazy off into a tangent, but I am of the belief that we have a generation of young Middle Easterners and Palestinians coming up that are being defined by their oppression and their struggles. And that is not a thing that I want my children or any children, especially children of a diaspora, to be defined by. I think that it's important that we constantly reinforce to our children that these are the things that have been happened to us, but our oppressors do not define us. We are Palestinian, and we have a culture that has existed for thousands of years. We are Middle Eastern, we are Syrian, we are Yemeni, we are Moroccan, we are, Jordanian, Lebanese, and the things that are happening to us are not who we are. Who we are is a strong, beautiful, intelligent people. So yeah, that's my soapbox for the day. But I think it's an important distinction to constantly have to reinforce to our children, because the people who are oppressing us, who are taking our culture, who are appropriating it, they're not doing that. They're telling us what you have is bad, what you have is worthless. And while we'll steal and nitpick and take pieces of it and claim it as our own, when you do it, it's garbage. But when we do it, we give it value. And that's not the truth. The truth is that we are valuable as a culture. We are valuable as a people, and we have so much to contribute. And even if we didn't have something to contribute, it doesn't matter, because we're still human beings, and our life has value. Writing this book was kind of interesting. What I discovered is that you can't just draw pictures and think that you're going to have a book. You actually have to know how to use like InDesign, and you have to be able to talk to a publisher and get things at the right size for printing, and really, really spell check, because you will find a typo in your book halfway through printing and have to reprint a bunch of pages, which did happen to me. So I think a lot of my challenges were technical in creating this book. And then I think a lot of my challenges were making sure that the book had heart. It was, I think, really important to me as a person who is Palestinian and a writer of color that this be a quality book. And I think that takes time, and that takes a lot of revision, and it's like thinking about each word. So for me, when I'm writing, I really take the time to think about each and every single word that I'm using, how I'm using it, and, is it appropriate? How does it make you feel? How would it make a child feel? Like, why are kids so invested in this book? Why do they love it so much? And it's because I believe, and I hope, I really sat down and I took the time to figure out how they want to be communicated to, That was important for me. And then I think a lot of people shy away from the word Palestine. Unfortunately, I think it has sort of a negative, there's a stigmatism attached to that word. So when Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine, I think sometimes people tense up. There's a little bit of like, what is this book actually about? Like, what are you indoctrinating my child into? And I think that's changing, thankfully, thanks to social media and thanks to, pressure from around the world. And, people are sort of beginning to see that everyone deserves human rights. But those sorts of things, they just take time. So I think a lot of any issues that I had around, writing the book culturally was just, I think, in the title. I think people were a little like, taken aback at the word Palestine, like they weren't quite sure how to react to a children's book when their first instinct or their first thought about Palestine was like this war-torn country that, breeds terrorism and, is so complicated, like these issues are so complicated. And it's like, no, it's about a lion in a crib who flies, who makes wishes, and, it's not what you think it is. So I actually have to say I genuinely appreciate the people that gave the book a chance without ever being concerned that it might have something in there that would scare them. So, and I think when people read this book, they are going to walk away with a good feeling. I think that if you're Palestinian and read this book, I think it hits really close to home. Like, we all have had that that understanding that we as children of diaspora are just so privileged and that we can come and go places as we please. And there's like a whole world of family and friends that we will truly never be able to connect with the same way, right? Like, we were sort of in some respects, we're sort of ripped away from this lifestyle. There's grandparents we only get to see if we're lucky once a year. Or in my case, I think there was a point where I didn't see my grandmother for 19 years before she passed away, which is crazy if you think about it. I have a living grandmother in the world that it took me 20 years to meet. And I think that if you're not Palestinian, you will walk away with this book feeling like you know a little bit more about Palestine. Like you'll just have a good feeling inside. Like maybe you'll feel a little bit like you made a friend, a little bit like you have insight into a culture that you didn't have insight into before. So again, I want to thank everybody here for your time, for taking the time to watch this. I tried to keep it short. It's like 10 minutes, I promise, 10 minutes of your life. And get the book, Laith the Lion Goes to Palestine. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to www.laiththelion.com. It makes an excellent Eid present for those who are celebrating. And thank you and have a great day.